want to welcome you to the Bible study To Know Christ. I'm Jeff Pedersen, the pastor of the Lutheran Church of Peace in Platteville, Wisconsin. Thank you for joining me as we continue our study on the nations. As we study the Bible, we hear about all these different nations. The main one, the most central nation that we hear about as far as their history would be Israel. Israel and Judah. But we also hear about the surrounding nations, those nations that Israel was interacting with. And so as we think about nations, the nation of Israel was to be, that God would bless Israel, that they in turn would be a blessing to all the other nations. And so the understanding here is that the nation of Israel is to build up all of their neighbors. And that's always to say that as God is blessing us and building us up as a nation, and as we are filled with God's love, and as we are filled with God's goodness, and as we prosper, that we are here to prosper all the other nations. And here again, the great blessing that God gave to Israel was the Savior, Jesus Christ. And this is the blessing, that Jesus is the Savior, not just for Israel, but for all the nations of the world. So that as Israel is blessed in Jesus Christ, so we too are blessed in Jesus Christ, no matter what nation that we are from. But it also goes both ways. Israel is not only to be a blessing to all the other nations, but all the other nations are also to be there to support and to strengthen Israel. And so that is what this whole idea is that as we study now biblical history in the Old Testament, unfortunately what we learn is that these things are not happening. Israel sees that, we are God's people, God has blessed us, but they don't see the blessings going any further than themselves. It becomes kind of a greedy attitude, a selfish attitude of, these are my blessings, they belong to us, and you can't have them. And then the attitude of the other nations is that they too want to be, in a sense, king of the hill. They want to be the most powerful nation or empire. And then they too have the same kind of an attitude of not building up all the other nations around them, but rather to conquer them. And so as I think about nations, it's one thing to say that we want to become a strong nation, but it seems like every one of these nations throughout biblical history has the desire to want to become an empire. To say that not only is our nation strong, but we now have expanded our boundaries to where we are the empire, that all other nations now are under our domain. And so that's so much of what, as we read biblical history, as we read the Old Testament, we see the rise and the fall of empires. And so that's a lot of what I've been focusing in on these last number of weeks. But we also sometimes see where it is cities. The rise and the fall of cities. Cities that were very powerful. And so as we read the prophets, we not only hear where it's God's judgment against the nations, but sometimes we even hear where it's God's judgment on a particular city. And so today, one of the cities that I want to focus in on is that of the city of Tyre. It was on the Mediterranean Sea, and it was part of the nation of Phoenicia. And so as we think about Tyre being on the Mediterranean Sea, it was a seaport. It was a very wealthy city. And it's wealthy because that's what a seaport does, is that you have all kinds of imports coming in, but it's also a place where things are exported. And so with all of the shipping that is going on and the distributing, that there's a lot of money to be made. And so as we think about Tyre, it was a very wealthy nation. it was considered to be the gateway of the sea. As I think about St. Louis has the arch, and that is oftentimes the city, St. Louis is oftentimes the city that's referred to as being the gateway to the west. Or as I think of San Francisco in the Golden Gate Bridge, that city is oftentimes referred to as being the gateway to the Pacific. And so that kind of gives us an idea of what Tyre was looked upon as being the gateway to the sea, the gateway to the Mediterranean, that as you were to leave Tyre, that you could sail to all the other regions or all the other cities of the Mediterranean and beyond. So it was a place of opportunity to get on a ship, to say, I'm going to sail to Tarshish or to Alexandria or all of these other cities in the Mediterranean, in the Asian Sea, and places like that. So we think of all of these key cities and along the seaports, and why they were so strong. It was because of their shipping. Now here again, living in the Midwest, we have the Mississippi River, so there is a certain amount of shipping, lots of cargo going up and down the river in barges. But I've had the opportunity to go to Duluth Superior, the Twin Ports, where there's lots of shipping. And you see a lot of different boats going in and out of there. Some are international boats. Some of these ships that they sail the Great Lakes. But what are some of the cargo that I noticed that is being shipped out of Duluth and Superior? Well, I think of iron ore, grains. But then I happen to notice that some of the goods that are being shipped in, or one of the big products, would be oil. I see international oil ships coming into Duluth Superior, going to the refineries there. And so we see just how important shipping is. And so we look at this city. We think of the city as being a city that prospers, a city where I'm sure there were a lot of good jobs for the people, a city that was being built up in every way, a city that was strong because it had a steady flow of income. And so we wonder what brings judgment upon this city. Well, I read from Isaiah chapter 23, verse 1. An oracle concerning Tyre. Wail, O ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is destroyed and left without house or harbor. From the land of Cyprus, word has come to them. And so as I think about this verse from Isaiah chapter 23, wail, O ships of Tarshish. Now when we think about the ships of Tarshish, they're mentioned so many times that the ships that are built in Tarshish, they were the most fabulous ships. They were large ships. And to see them floating along or sailing along the sea must have been very impressive. And there must have been something about those ships that as they would come to port to say, wow, those are the ships from Tarshish. They are the Cadillac of all the ships. And I only say that and mention that because it appears so many times. You always hear about the cedars of Lebanon, and then we think about the ships of Tarshish. Jonah was getting on a ship heading to Tarshish. And so these cargo ships must have been very impressive. And so you think about cargo ships, or just ships in general. Which ships are impressive to you? Well, we think about the Titanic that sailed almost 100 years ago. That was to be such an impressive ship. Unfortunately, it sank. Or we think about some of these cruise ships now. They are just huge, and they can carry so many passengers. Or we think about automobiles that are made in Detroit and how impressive so many of those automobiles may be. Or we think about the airplanes, the jetliners that are made in Seattle. And so what's impressive to you? That as you think about the things that are made, things that you use, what is the product that stands above all others to say, wow, look at that. Now that's impressive. To the point where you would want to just go and stand on the edge of the sea to be able to see these ships. About a year and a half ago, I was in Denmark, and I went to a Viking museum. And I was very impressed with this museum. I didn't realize just how far the Vikings would go. I mean, they were even sailing way into the Nile. So not only were they out in the seas, but also in the rivers. And so as you think about their work, the Vikings, a lot of times we think about Vikings as being warriors, but for the most part, they were seafaring people who were into the shipping business. But as I looked at those ships, there were three different kinds of ships. There were the passenger ships. There were the cargo ships. But then there were also the warships. And that's kind of the way it is today. We have passenger ships, we have cargo ships, we have our warships. But then we also think about that in terms of our airplanes now. We have the same thing. We have our passenger planes, we have our cargo planes, and we have our fighter planes. But what is concerning about this verse that I just read? Wail, O ships of Tarshish. Why are the ships of Tarshish to be wailing? They are wailing because there is no port now to bring their goods. It's one thing to fill your ship up with goods, but where is it going to head? If the port is gone, where can it dock? Where can it unload? And so many of these products now are just going to sit out at sea and rot. I think about New Orleans. New Orleans is such a great seaport for the United States. And when Katrina, that terrible hurricane, hit New Orleans, it shut down this great seaport. And there were all kinds of ships that were out in the Gulf of Mexico waiting to come in. But there was no port now to deliver the goods. The oil ships were out there, but there were no refineries now where they could go and empty the oil. And there were all kinds of other ships that had food and other products that our nation needs that would go into this port of New Orleans, and then the goods would be shipped up to through the Mississippi River. And then, of course, the same thing with goods from the United States that needed to go to New Orleans as a port where the ships would come in and to receive these goods. But, what do these ships do now? What do the crews of these ships do now that the port is shut down or the port has been literally destroyed? It's very concerning. And so that was the echo. Not only was this something that was heard in Tarshish, but it was something that was echoed throughout the whole area. Where do we send our goods now? And that is the problem with natural disasters, is what happens. But the problem with Tyre is that they became arrogant. They became arrogant to say that, we are so self-reliant. We are the envy of so many people and so many other cities. We don't need them. They need us. And we become so self-supportive. And we have got good products. We've got a good service here. We've got great ports that the whole world needs. And we are making money hand over fist, and we have built good infrastructure in our city. We've all got nice homes, and we are all very, very busy making money. We don't need other cities we don't need God. And so arrogance comes and fills the land, and as that does, places begin to weaken. God brings his destruction in hopes that the people will repent. And so it's their relationship with Israel that Israel, once again, is a nation that is to bless others. And we know that Israel, as we look at the history that God has with Israel, there were times where they had their high points as a nation. But then there are also those times where God was very dissatisfied with Israel. But the other nations and the other cities were not to rejoice over this, but rather that they were to be compassionate, concerned. What do we do to help our neighbor? And so instead of being there to help, to be concerned, they rejoiced in their sufferings. And that's the thing about love. Love is such that it does not rejoice in other people's sufferings and hurts, but rather love moves people to have compassion. And then also love is such that when good things are happening to other people, we rejoice in that. And so the attitude that should be happening here between nations and cities should be an attitude of love, to say that as we hear about good things that are happening to your city, as we hear about good things that are happening to your nation, we rejoice in that. Or if we hear that there is destruction in your city or in your nation, we are concerned. And so I'm always pleased that whenever there's natural disasters that are happening in other countries where there is such a critical need, that people come to their aid in a lot of different ways to say that we are here to help you in this time of critical need, but we are also here to help you to rebuild your country or to rebuild your city. I'm going to be going here in just a few days on a mission trip to Joplin, Missouri. It's a city that was devastated earlier in the year by a tornado. It's caused mass destruction for the city, and my hope would be that for all the cities of our nation, that we would say, look at what has happened to our sister city, Joplin. These are people who are hurting. There is death. There is mourning. There are people who have been injured. There are people where their businesses and their place of work has been destroyed. So it's kind of that same situation as, where do we go to work? The factory that I work in has been destroyed. But what it means when people come in from other cities to be able to say, we have compassion. Your hurt is our hurt. We are here to help you in your time of crisis. We are here to rebuild your city. And that has got to be the attitude of our people. Whether it be our nation's attitude toward another nation or our city's attitude toward another city, is that we are here for you. We are here to build up. We are here to strengthen. But never to rejoice in, ha ha, look at what has happened to you. And so that is why God was upset with Tyre. Is that as Israel, as they were being punished, as they were being destroyed, as they were being hurt, what was the attitude of Tyre? It was one of, ha ha. And so you think about, what are the strengths of your city? What are those things that you are proud of? To say that as a city, this is what we produce. This is what we are producing as people. This is what we are producing as far as products. And as we ship these products, it's got our city's name on it, and we are proud. What are those things? And to say that as we ship our products, that we are making our nation stronger. We're making the nations around the world stronger. we're making the communities around us stronger. So, but getting back to the ha-ha, we never want to see this being the attitude. That was Tyre's attitude toward Jerusalem. And I'm going to read now Ezekiel chapter 26, verses 1 through 14. So listen as we hear God's judgment against Tyre. In the 11th year, on the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, because Tyre has said of Jerusalem, Aha! The gate to the nation is broken, and its doors have swung open to me. Now that she lies in ruin, I will prosper. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I'm against you, O Tyre, and I will bring many nations against you like the sea casting up its waves. They will destroy the walls of Tyre and pull down her towers. I will scrape away her rubble and make her a bare rock. Out in the sea she will become a place to spread fish nets, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. She will become plunder for the nations, and her settlements on the mainland will be ravaged by the sword. Then they will know that I am the Lord. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. From the north I am going to bring against Tyre Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, his horses and chariots with horsemen and a great army. He will ravage your settlements on the mainland with the sword. He will set up siege works against you, build a ramp up to your walls, and raise his shields against you. He will direct the blows of his battering rams against your walls and demolish your towers with his weapons. His horses will be so many that they will cover you with dust. Your walls will tremble at the noise of the war horses, wagons, and chariots when he enters your gates, as men enter a city whose walls have been broken through. The hoofs of his horses will trample all your streets. He will kill your people with the sword, and your strong pillars will fall to the ground. They will plunder your wealth and loot your merchandise. They will break down your walls and demolish your fine houses and throw your stones, timbers, and rubble into the sea. I will put an end to your noisy songs, and the music of your harps will be heard no more. I will make you a bare rock, and you will become a place to spread fish nets. You will never be rebuilt, for I, the Lord, have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. And so here again, as Jerusalem was having its problems, Tyre should have had a sympathetic attitude of what can we do to help you? Or what could we have done to prevent you from being destroyed? But instead, they were rejoicing in Jerusalem's downfall. They were saying, ha ha. Tyre thought that they were a city that was so strong that nothing could ever befall them. So arrogant that they could look at another city and to say, ha ha, we rejoice in your destruction this day. And here again, you look at Tyre. Tyre was strong in every which way. If you were to look at all of the points that make a city strong, they had all those points in place. And so they could raise their noses and they could be arrogant and they could say, aha. But the prophet Ezekiel, God spoke through the prophet Ezekiel saying that destruction will come to this city. And I'm sure the response was, ha ha, yeah, right. Nobody could ever destroy our city. But we see where the city is going to be destroyed. And how is it going to be destroyed? Well, there's a powerhouse nation that's rising up, the nation of Babylon. And their king, whose name was Nebuchadnezzar, was going to be the driving force that was going to obliterate the city off of the map. So much so that it will never be rebuilt. Isn't that amazing? To where God was going to use this nation to punish Tyre, to say, you will be no more. Bringing in their armies, bringing in their chariots, bringing in their battering rams, trampling their whole city so that it would be nothing but a bunch of rubble and ruin. A city where there was dancing and songs, harps, and music being played. A city where everything was going so well, but now a city that was completely plundered. And so as a people, that we rejoice and give thanks to God in our prosperity. We are very thankful, but we must always keep that into perspective to say that we are blessed because of God, and we keep our perspective that no matter what, we will always worship the Lord our God. Always remembering where our blessings come from. And as we are blessed, that we have the goodwill within our hearts to say, how do we stand here as a blessing now to those around us, other nations, other cities? That as we grow strong, that we are strengthening those around us. That we never have the attitude toward God to say to God, ha, we are self-made. We are self-reliant. We are independent. We have no need for you, God. Well, what city was ever stronger than Tyre? Tyre doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed. And for us to think that we can do better, well, we better think again. We must always keep our devotion to God, understanding what our role is, that with God's help, we can always be strong, but that we share that blessing and that prosperity with others, that we may be a blessing to all the other nations, all the other cities of the world. Well, thank you for joining me. Join me again next week as we continue our study to know Christ.
On behalf of the Lutheran Church of Peace, I'm Robert Snyder. Thank you for watching our program, and please join us again for To Know Christ.